Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram language design review, part of our incremental language development series. First up today, generate password.
Yep. So there is a ref page, and then there's some examples and discussion points here. But we talked about this function a little bit last year, and you wanted us to do a little bit more of a deep dive, both internally and externally, to kind of see what best practices are on generating passwords. We have Jason here from Syscom, just in case there's any specific questions. But Ian and I dove into a number of different standards for passwords, and this just put out a relatively new set of guidelines. And we think we have a pretty robust system here with kind of two general methods of generating passwords. One is
Okay.
the random
Hey,
character
listen,
password. Oh,
practical point here.
yep.
I'm not able to run the docs update stuff to get this new
Okay.
documentation. It's obviously not running on this machine, so somebody could report that, please.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm on.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have something from anywhere relatively recently, it'll be reasonably up to date. So you don't have to have the latest one if you want to look at the ref page.
Okay. Okay.
So what we've basically done is there's two common password schemes. One is character based, which is basically a random set of ASCII characters,
Yep.
and the other is word based, which is
Yep.
the most common version is diceware. And we've implemented both, and then we've added a bunch of parameters to let you control kind of how they work. Um,
Okay.
what
And
what
the one phrase, okay, so we've basically just got open close and then words gives the passphrase thing.
Yep. And then the options version there is kind of based on what we do for generate symmetric key, where
Yes.
the different methods have lots of different parameters that relate to one or another. So you can say, I want a words-based password, but I want to use German words, or I only want to use nouns, or I want 19 words in it, or just 3 words, or I want to add numbers and symbols to it also. There's a lot of flips,
Yeah,
switches
right.
you may want to turn on and off. And so we've kind of used that as a baseline for the design to say, okay, you may want to fiddle with the parameters a
Oh,
bunch.
looks
And
nice. This looks nice. Now, I mean, I assume, okay, so we generate password and then that most people will put it in a password manager or some such other thing.
yeah, so there's a scope example on the ref page, I think, of using it with a system credential, for example. I just want to generate a new password and I want to store it somewhere
Oh, Stephen
for my
Roger is here
application.
in case.
Um,
The,
Docs update is not working on theta.
In what, like, what way?
Well, it just says command not found. ZSH.
Oh, that. Okay. Um, I'll take a look at that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Um, okay, where is that example?
I think it's under applications. There's a bunch of options there. Yeah, so this example of I can generate a password, I can encrypt something with it, or I can create a system credential, put whatever I want into it, and then read it back out. So
Sandra on our live stream is commenting that generate password, it seems strange to have generate password before we have random string. It's an interesting point.
yeah, I mean, we've talked about random string before. The problem is that there's so many different things you may want in a random string. We have create UUID, which gives you a random string, but there are different UUID standards we can use. Where most of the time you want a random string, it's somewhat application specific.
Right. I really like that use case, system credential. That seems really useful.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and we've set the defaults to have relatively high entropy, so we use 32 characters as the default for generate password without any parameters, which is like 200 bits of entropy, which is well over what the baseline requirements are.
yeah, I don't think anybody cares how long it is. By the time you're generating something which is irrelevant, no human is going to type it in.
Right. The main reason we didn't go longer is that it's still fairly common for the maximum password length to not go over 32 bits or 32 characters in a lot of places. So we've tried to have the baseline be secure, but still work in most places, and you can make it longer if you want to.
Okay, remaining design questions.
Yeah. So in some cases, it's nice to have some presets for these parameters. We have the defaults for words, the defaults for characters. I was thinking possibly as a WFR to have some sort of, password scheme lookup. Say, I want an Apple ID compliant password, or I want an NTLM compliant password.
Why isn't that just part of generate password? I mean,
We could have it be part of GeneratePassword. So I actually have that hooked up right now, but I didn't document it because I wasn't sure if we want to say,
we
generate
do that
password
for
ID.
for the blockchains, right? We do a bunch
Mm.
of things where you can generate. What are you generating? You're generating keys for blockchains. I'm trying to remember how that works.
Okay. Yeah, we could easily have like a packlet updatable component for it because conceivably Apple ID password requirements change over time. Same with everything else.
Yes, but I mean, what do we do for blockchain?
I do not know offhand, but I'm guessing it's part of the blockchain packlet.
Generate asymmetric
Asymmetric
key.
key pair.
That's the one, and we're doing that.
Okay, that's the type one, I see.
Right, here we go.
Okay.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, keys suitable for blockchains. That's I think the pattern to follow.
Okay. Yeah, that should be pretty straightforward.
Okay. Sander is commenting on our live stream that having alphanumerical, et cetera, to make random biosequences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the random string, we should probably do random string, and we could just say random string.
We could do something similar where we have parameters you can turn on and off and have presets.
Look, one of the issues is
there's one in the function repository with
Yeah,
some
there
named
is.
character sets.
the issue is if I do this, I have to wrap a string join around it, right?
Right.
To make that work.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Why is that so slow?
I think it has to index on the very first invocation. I mean, Bob, you might know more than me, but
Why is that
It's
slow?
just I'm just bringing in the metadata from the repository.
How much metadata is there to bring in?
I don't know, just a couple kilobytes.
Can I make the suggestion that somebody looks at this as part of our speed
Sure.
efforts?
So in the details here, there's a few named things like uppercase and lowercase, and
This is quite sensible. You probably should have alphanumeric. This is sensible. We should also
Okay.
have genome sequence and protein sequence because they're both, again, things that
Yeah.
that
common things that you'd want to do.
let's do it. Let's move this. Thank you, Sander, for that suggestion. Let's
Mhm.
figure out how to move this into the system.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look
This
at
is
that.
by Sander. Thank you, Sander, even more.
Yeah.
This seems useful. Yeah, and these are cool as well. Very nice. All right, should we move on?
Yeah. So there's one question I had that I haven't been able to figure out is it's often when you're generating a password, it's nice to get some basic metrics like how many bits of entropy it has or like the generic password quality ratings. To do that, you kind of have to get that information when you generate the password because entropy is based on the specific scheme used to generate the password. Like you need to know how big the
Why
corpus
don't
for the
why don't we
word
force the
is.
thing to have? Why don't we have a parameter that says get at least this much? I mean, I hate using the term entropy for this because it's a very weird use of that term. I mean, it's basically you're asking how big is the space,
Mm-hmm.
and then how big is the password space? How many bits? How many effective bits are being sought? And I think that could be perfectly well be an option that,
Required entropy or target entropy or something like that.
yeah, I don't know whether that's the right term to use, but I mean, it's basically the number of bits. The concept is that the space from which you are sampling this thing is 2 to that number.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it could turn out that the password, you sample it from random characters, and the password ends up being, to be or not to be, that is the question, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
The monkeys type Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
And that, a password cracker would probably be able to crack that.
Yeah.
So it's a different question whether, I mean, then this is where entropy in the world at large is totally confused. There are two questions. One is, how big was the sample space?
Mm-hmm.
And the second is, could a password cracker crack it?
Right. There's theoretical entropy and there's actual time to
Right.
crack, or yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can certainly take a pass at that.
Well, so let's just think about that. So one question is, I mean, the thing somebody wants is not to say, I mean, it's completely unrealistic to say, I've got this password. It came from this space, but it turns out it's to be or not to be. See what I'm saying?
Right.
And we can't know with reliability, or it turns out you're generating random numbers, and the random numbers you generate are 3141596.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the random string ends up being password or some other commonly used.
Yeah, right. So the probability of that is very low.
Mm-hmm.
If that's that's kind of the screwiness that I described in great detail in this book I wrote recently about second order thermodynamics, which talks about entropy and its definition and so on. But I mean, it's a big mess.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that we can say is we could have, as part of the association, it's basically the bit space. I mean, I hate the fact that people call it entropy because it's so confusing.
Right.
And it's password bits or something. I don't know whether that's a term of art, but it is the size of the space in bits.
Mm-hmm.
And we could put that into, min password bits could be something in the association, and it will basically error out if you make a change. Or we could say min password bits is an option. And I mean, either way, what it's going to do is if you give a specification and it violates min password bits, what's it going to do?
Right. It should give some sort of failure or error. I want 100 bits of entropy, but I'm only providing 15 characters for the set. So
Right.
And I want it to be less than 20 characters long. It's not
Right. So one thing
pass.
is to put it in the association, and the other is to, and yeah, I mean, putting all of these things, it's fine. I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't have some of these.
Yeah, I think the main
I mean,
disadvantage is that it just ends up being a lot on the page, but we have autocomplete, we have various user assistance things that probably make it reasonable. So
I mean, we could have a performance goal.
mm.
You know what? I think it might be useful to have a performance goal that could just be a number, maybe. But I see, well, what's it going to do? If you've specified that it's words, and then you say min password bits, well, that's okay. You say words, and then min password bits goes to 50, 100, whatever it is. It will generate the necessary number of words.
Yep. Yeah, and
Okay.
that's useful because the options interact, and you may be using a smaller dictionary, so it may need to use more words, or you may use a larger dictionary.
Right. So in other words, some things will be automatic.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll
Anything
move
else we
forward with
need?
that, and then
Yep.
we'll look at random string. We'll get a prototype and look at that in another meeting.
Okay. Min password bits would be my suggestion, but see if there's a better one or a better term of art for
Okay.
that concept.
Sounds good. Right, Jason, that's all we needed you for. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Unless you have any comments, Jason.
No, not really. I mean, I looked through it. It all looks, checks out the way I would expect it to, and looks, best practices. So looks
Sounds
look
good.
to me.
Yeah, we
Okay.
have some basic
Thanks, Bill.
sanity, like quality control things. It's not it has a random block in place so that you aren't going to have password seed attacks where you know impact the random number generator and then suddenly you're spitting out the same password or things like that.
Well, password should never be seedable.
Right.
It should not. This should not have. It should not interact with.
Yeah,
the random
it's
number
totally independent of that. So yeah,
And one question is, in terms of computer security,
Mhm.
for this, for example, if people run this in the cloud,
Mhm.
what on earth is happening there? I mean, in other words, do we have any understanding of what level of security we are or not providing with that?
So the evaluation and the password generation is done locally. The main concern would be some sort of side channel attack where you're doing something like setting an up value on generate password that would log it, which I did some experimenting with, and I think there are some good protections we can put in place to avoid that.
No, I'm asking if people are running this in the cloud version,
Mm-hmm.
is there any different issues? Because we don't want to know what password they generated,
Right.
fundamentally.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's any different than any other cloud service where you're generating a password in a cloud service. I don't know I mean, many of these password managers are now cloud services, and I don't know
Right.
where they generate. Maybe Jason knows that. How does that work for a cloud service? When you're generating a password in a cloud service, are you just trusting that nobody's, looking at it, or what's the idea?
Well, I mean, a lot of times the code will run locally to generate the password. Be like some type of Java or something that runs on your machine instead of like on their machine in the cloud. But I mean,
Okay.
it's just generally some type of, random number string generator. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times it will run locally. That way they never even see it. They provide the code, but you execute it and everything in your sandbox of your browser.
Yeah, but that's not going to work for us because if people want to say set their system credential, well, actually, what happens with system credentials in the cloud? Does anybody know?
I don't think we have anyone here that can speak to that.
Okay,
But
let's find that out because
yeah.
that's I think we have a notion of system credentials in the cloud, but I don't know how it works.
Mhm. I'll
Okay.
follow up with Joel, and if we need to look at it in more detail, we will.
Fine. Sounds good. Okay. Thanks, Jason. See ya.
Yep. See, yep.
Okay, select subsets.
Yeah, so this is actually a collection of functions we have. I think these might actually be from Sander. He's a regular viewer of these streams, but they deal with the various functions that generate lots of permutations, subsets, tuples, where oftentimes, at least I've found when working with generators like this, you're generating a lot of variations and then you're trying to filter them down to find something that matches a particular criteria.
Right.
And so,
Well,
these
subsets,
are basic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is a thing where you're not actually generating all the subsets. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Yeah. The idea
Not
is it's only.
exactly. No, that's not exactly right. You're iterating through all of them. You're just not collecting them all at once. So in other words, it affects memory, not time.
I see. And how does this relate to sort of a bunch of things that I think Ed has worked on, where you are numbering your subset thing and you're able to step through, I want my first subset, my second subset, etc.
Right, that's the subset from index, I think.
Could be.
That
Yeah,
sounds right.
subset index, I think.
And who
Ed's
knows
function.
about the new kind of generator mechanism in the compiler? Does anybody know about that? Is that relevant to this?
Might be relevant, but I don't know anything about it.
Let's find out about that, because that's a scheme for having general compiled generators.
Okay.
But I like the idea of select subsets, select permutations, select tuples. I don't really see any. It seems useful.
Yeah, I was trying to think if there was anything else that kind of falls under that general umbrella. These are certainly the first three functions I think of where you're, generating lots of variations or subgroups from a
Well, another one is
collection.
select graphs.
Mm.
I mean, I need that all the frigging time. I'm trying to enumerate small graphs with certain characteristics. It may be an idiosyncratic use,
Mm.
but that's a case. It's a slightly less trivial case to sample over.
Okay.
Yeah, a generalization might be select from enumeration.
Right, but unless you have a generator, a mechanism for doing the enumeration, you can't do this.
You absolutely have, you absolutely need that.
But that's probably what these generator things will allow one to do. But I'm fundamentally, okay, I have two comments. I think these functions are worthwhile to implement. I think that this generator mechanism that we're building now is probably the way to implement them. Sandra is commenting on select integer partitions. Yeah, Ethan was commenting with respect to the generate password stuff. This thing about, minimum number of uppercase letters and minimum number of lowercase, blah, blah, blah. That's usually what people, when people say make a password for this thing and it has to have a minimum of blah and blah and blah, that is presumably what you are specifically supporting up here.
Yep. Yeah, there's support for Boolean values for, include special characters, include
No,
these special characters,
but they say
include n number of.
no. Listen. They often it's include at least one uppercase. Include at least one non-alphabetic.
Mm-hmm.
We should make sure we can map into that. So we should look at the specifications for some of these places which say, somebody must have collected this. This is the kind of thing, by the time people collect, there's a collector of everything.
Yeah, I did an analysis. I have a table, not super handy, but yeah, the parameters that are showing here are specific for words. The parameters for the characters version is tailored towards those.
I see. Okay, fine. But then let's go look up a bunch of common services, whether it's Apple IDs or whatever, and let's just put those in, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, we can do. I think I did the top 100 websites based on traffic that have passwords. I have an inventory somewhere, so yeah.
Okay, should we move on? De-experimentalization.
Yeah, so this is starts with a bit of a discussion topic that we started previously, but I collected that iconized version as an association with the list of all functions which are marked as experimental since version 10. We've been collecting them. There's 925 currently. We had a kind of a big spike in version 12, and then it's been going.
What was
up and
that?
down.
Was that some particular class of functions like neural
So
net functions or
if you
something?
scroll down, you can see the version there. So it's a collection of a number of different things. Let's see, there's a lot of things in audio. The blockchain stuff is a big group of things there. Molecule as well. and then some of the web elements and web objects. So what I'd kind of intended to do here, that's still a bit of a work in progress, is to kind of collect the different functional areas where we have big blocks of experimental functionality and try and work with the development team there to see, why was this marked as experimental and what things are still kind of pending in that design.
Well,
We
I'd
have.
ask a different question.
Okay.
For example, for molecules, lots of stuff
Mhm.
is working nicely,
Mm-hmm.
but some stuff is kind of hokey. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's kind
The
of like,
core
let's
functionality's there, but some of it isn't refined.
let's
Is that
ask the question for every one of these experimental functions, what do we not like about it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think some of them, like the around family, is something that's become very refined, but it was marked as experimental because we just didn't have the breadth of functionality we wanted everywhere, and
Okay,
we've
that's
been
a different issue.
improving
Yeah,
that.
right.
So
That's a different reason. Right.
yeah, there's a wide umbrella of things that fall under experimental. Some of them are truly experimental. Some of them were not finished and have maybe gotten close enough to look at, and other ones there's
Well,
just weirdness in
I
the
would say the
design.
main point is, like text contents, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I can criticize that on the grounds of how we're tagging kind of text elements and so on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the text element framework is not refined. I think we've had some interesting developments, and we've had a better understanding as we work with things like LLMs on what text analysis stuff works and what doesn't. And that's probably something that needs a proper design refresh rather than just a
Yeah.
promotion.
Right. But so I mean, like snub polyhedron, I have no
Mhm.
idea why that's experimental, other than perhaps in the first version it didn't have full implementation.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, again, for every one of these is what do we not like about it?
Okay.
Right. Like axiomatic theory, I've been using that a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not bad. I mean, it's some those are just from version 12. So
Yep. Yeah. The
this is going
early
to be everything.
versions, Wikipedia search, autocomplete, and index stuff were relatively early versions. Yeah, you can uniconize that or see the output if you want. It was just kind of large.
I mean, some of these things like, that as Wikipedia evolves or doesn't evolve, or we want to support it more or less or whatever, that might change.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something like, the definition of a triangle isn't, is never going to change. But this is something that is relying on some outside. I mean, okay, so the autocomplete functionality, that's just bad functionality, really, in modern times. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff here that's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
Yes.
things there's things to criticize here.
Yeah, I think snippet is something that has largely worked, but it needs a little bit of refinement. It's one of those things that, as it's commonly used in the LLM framework, and so we've learned things from there, and we could probably polish that up and have it be fully implemented. The text structure, text element stuff is rough and needs another real pass.
I mean,
I don't know a lot about the Ask framework.
the Ask framework is not used as much as it should be, and we need to understand why.
Okay. Okay. I like that core idea of go through each function and say, what don't we like about it? And if the
Yeah.
things we don't like about it is short, then, or it's fixable, then it's worth looking at promoting them. Because I think, we started with experimental with the idea of being something that we might change or it might get moved around.
See, I'm sure that that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Assume
And all this
determined.
channel framework stuff, again, it's like it's not obvious that it's designed right.
Yeah. And there's some things like the neural nets, obviously, we're using. I don't know if all of the layers are things that get used heavily. But there's entire frameworks that are basically experimental, and some of them we use pretty regularly and probably don't need to stay experimental, but they might be dynamic enough that it's hard to pin down a
Well,
long-term
the neural
design.
net stuff, is the reason we made that experimental is the way we have done it with layers and so on is not the way we originally imagined doing it.
Mm.
And, you know, the world is moving closer to how we originally imagined doing it.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure that these are. All right, let's take a look at some of these. Gallery view. I mean, that's again something that's a bit rough. I mean, it should be looked at again. I don't think we are totally confident. If we change something that has been experimental, I'm not sure that we really have a pattern for how to do that.
Right.
See what I'm saying? If we actually changed the functionality, we didn't make it compatible. I don't think we've ever done that.
Yeah, I don't know of any functions we've had that are experimental that have had major changes thus far.
I can't imagine why decrypt file is experimental.
I think it's because the first version of encrypt file and decrypt file were not full featured. I mean, those have been used
well,
pretty
fine.
regularly, so that's probably one that's eligible to be promoted to no longer experimental.
Like this whole thing, active classification, I cannot imagine that's really quite as good as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh. I mean, video being experimental, that's silly.
Yeah.
Some of these, that's also silly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things here that are very clean and we should just de-experimentalize them.
Okay. I will work between meetings on triaging these and kind of going through. And the obvious cases, we can just have people work on obviously promoting them. The things that aren't really working, I guess we can leave where they are for the time being. And the stuff that's in the middle may need further discussion.
Well, I mean, so here, for example, the spatial statistics stuff looks like it's all experimental. And I think it's a question of having a look at that and seeing whether we're happy with it.
Okay. Biosequence stuff as well.
Yeah. Got a little bit out of control, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely ballooned in the version 12 and subversion cycles. It's calmed down a little bit since then. But
Yeah. Okay. Find isomers is okay. This chemical stuff, we have got to just decide what to do with it.
mm-hmm.
Personally, I think that's probably just mostly de-experimentalizable with a few exceptions.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then some
Sounds
of the
good.
trees stuff is again like the trees project has been getting refined, and probably some of this stuff is fairly stable, but there may be.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sounds good. All right. Anything else to cover here?
No, I think that should cover it for today.
Sounds good. See you all soon.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.